This episode of How I Built It is brought to you by two great sponsors. The first is our season-long sponsor. Liquid Web has been best known as a managed hosting company with tons of options. It's also designed a managed WordPress offering that is perfect for mission-critical sites. If you're looking for improved performance, maximized uptimes, and incredible support, Liquid Web is the partner you've been looking for. Every Liquid Web managed WordPress customer has iTheme Sync integrated into their managed portal, allowing them to update several sites with a single touch. Liquid Web hosts all of my critical websites, and I couldn't be happier with them. If you sign up today, using the discount code HowIBuiltIt33, you get 33% off for the next 6 months. Visit buildpodcast.net/liquid to get started. That's buildpodcast.net/liquid. It's also brought to you by Staging Pilot. Staging Pilot makes it easy and profitable to sell WordPress maintenance services. If WordPress maintenance isn't your primary focus, it could be a real-time suck. Maintaining a staging environment, updating and then deploying those updates, and diligently testing them is tedious work. With Staging Pilot, every part of the process is automated. Staging Pilot even automates the testing by doing visual comparisons of screenshots from your site before and after each update. It uses a bunch of fancy algorithms and AI to determine whether your site broke. If everything looks good, the updates are deployed to the live site. If something breaks, Staging Pilot halts the process and makes sure that nothing gets deployed. You get a chance to look at a simple before and after view so you can see what broke and then fix it before resuming automatic updates. Staging Pilot lets you build recurring revenue by offering maintenance plans without all the typical headaches. And I met the guys from Staging Pilot at WordCamp DC, and I've got to say they have a really impressive product. I talked to Nathan of Staging Pilot later in the season, so definitely keep an eye out for that. And if you want 20% off a lifetime purchase of Staging Pilot, which if you're a freelancer, you should definitely want, then head over to buildpodcast.net/pilot. That's 20% off your lifetime purchase at buildpodcast.net/pilot. Hey everybody. So this is another 2-part episode we've got for you, this time with Brian Hogg. He's going to be talking to us about a plugin that he built, as well as the general plugin development process. Brian is a fellow course developer like me. He's got a lot of great courses out there, and we talk pretty regularly about developing courses, but he's also an expert WordPress plugin developer. So you can learn a lot from him, like I did in this 2-part episode. In the first part, much like Andy's episode, we talk about his specific product. In the second half of the episode, we talk about general plugin development. So have a listen. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And without further ado, on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, my guest is Brian Hogg. Brian, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for being on the show. Brian and I are in an educator's mastermind together. We both develop online courses, and while we'll touch on that a little bit, we're actually going to talk about one of your plugins. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Event Calendar Newsletter, which was the first release plugin on my own, and then the first one I made pro. So, yep.
Cool. Very cool. So let's start there. Why don't you tell the listeners who you are and what you do and how you came up with the idea for Event Calendar Pro?
Sure. So again, Brian Hogg. So I've been custom developing stuff. I mean, I learned C back when I was 12 and have been developing in various languages for many years and stumbled upon WordPress. Probably quite a while ago now, actually. Even after meeting Mike Little, I still didn't. I'm like, I don't need WordPress. I can just create my own stuff in Notepad with HTML files. That's fine. But finally saw the light, and now I've been on WordPress for quite a while. So for that Event Calendar Newsletter plugin, it actually came from an own itch. So I run a couple different events in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And one of the there's like this community hub that someone started, Software Hamilton, that promotes the events by email. So he would promote our events, for local freelancers, and we were alternating between Wednesday and Saturday. So Saturday would be like 2 p.m. and Wednesday would be 6 p.m. And in his emails, a lot of times I noticed he put like Wednesday, 2 p.m. I'm like, whoa, no, people are at work. That's not the right time. What's going on? Are you doing this manually? And I noticed he had a WordPress site. So I figured he had some automated way to do it. And he's like, yeah, I'm doing it manually. I can't figure out any way to pull all the detail of the events that I need and stick them into MailChimp, or I think he was using MailChimp at the time. So I'm like, oh, maybe we can find a plugin for you. Searched around, couldn't find anything. So basically after one of the meetups, Coder Camp or something, where a bunch of developers get together, we headed to the pub, sat on with this grimy chair and kind of belted out the first version that was specific to his calendar, which isn't even a calendar anymore, Ajax calendar, and his software, and created a way for him to pull all the details of the events in the format he wanted and never make a mistake on our events again. So turns out that spot that we actually created has been kind of a mecca for startups in Hamilton. It's
nice.
Some people were on this other grimy couch. I was on the grimy chair. We're all squished together creating this app. I forget which app, while people drunkenly were throwing darts above their head, which is like extreme programming to the max.
Right, that's like a sport.
Not a sport that you might lose at with siblings. So,
that's awesome. So, so you are actually the second guest this season to say that you built the first iteration of your plugin in a pub.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's very cool to hear. For people who are looking for inspiration in maybe unique places, it sounds like a pub is the place to go.
Yes, but
relax, you're having a beer.
It was one beer. Like if you have 2 beers, everything goes downhill.
Yeah. And I know a lot of college kids say that, the more I drink, the better programmer I am. But believe me,
no.
That's not the case. You think that, but that's not the case.
You look the next day at your code and
or
just the functionality, and it's like, wait, this doesn't do anything.
What did I do here? Yeah,
that's funny.
So cool. Well, that's awesome. So, in the same vein as a lot of people on this show, you were scratching your own itch. And you said that this was your first WordPress plugin that you kind of submitted to the repo. Is that right?
No. So I had worked for a startup, and that's how I first started got into WordPress, was taking a Joomla extension and converting it into WordPress. And then so I released that for them, maintained it, and everything else. It's not on the repo anymore. But so this was the first kind of plugin that I myself released and tried to give back and figured I did a little more, like I added support for one more calendar, like a popular one, the Modern Tribe one, before releasing it publicly, just so more people could use it. But yep.
Nice, very nice. So you essentially initially did this for a friend, but as you grew it and decided to add like pro features, what kind of research did you do to figure out, what should I add? What should I make free? What should I have paid? Things like that.
Yep. So it kind of came about, and it was just really by listening to users. So it was sitting there for about a year, kind of steadily growing. And, it's again, not this huge plugin, but I was starting to get requests from people that I thought, oh, they're from, XYZ. I'm pretty sure they might have some budget, for features, right? So I didn't have the pro version at the time, but I'm like, you know what? Okay. It started getting to a point where I'm like, should I keep adding this to pro? Or should I spin this off, into free, or should I spin this off and create a pro version? And luckily through another mastermind group, and a couple of kind of, I guess, ad hoc mentors who've been doing it longer than I have, I questioned whether adding this, relatively small in terms of code, but relatively big in terms of time savings and value for the people using it. I'm like, should I make this, I could just pop it into free. Why not just pop it into free? And they're like, no, dude, like it'll totally be something that'll save people a lot of time, and that clearly they're willing to pay for. So that, that started, and that was just by filtering by categories for events. So adding that as kind of a first pro feature. And then again, from there, just listening to customers, because I could totally guess all day as to what, right. And I have added features that I'm like, this is obvious that this should be in there, even if no one's asked for it yet. But most of the time it's just listening to users, and they'll have way better ideas than you do. And chances are they're the customers, right? So, they'll know better a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And like, I find that with stuff I make, people are using things in ways I didn't even imagine. So, just by listening to yourself, you're really limiting the capabilities as well.
Exactly. So yep. So that's kind of how that came to be.
Very cool. So I had a fleeting thought now that I've lost, and I'm really bummed about it. So I hope. Oh, no, this is perfect. Actually, it's come back to me.
Yay.
So I just before this watched a video about the life of Pablo Picasso and his sketches, and there's an anecdote in here. You said that it's a small amount of code. Pablo Picasso this is lore that somebody asked him for a sketch on the street. He sketched something really quick, gave it to them. And he said this will be $30,000.
Oh, I heard 5,000. That's way more than I heard.
See, I heard 30,000. So let's say 5,000.
Maybe in today's money, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, right. The guy said $30,000. This took you 5 minutes, and he said, no, it took me a lifetime. And right, which is great. I mean, that's what you get when you have an experienced programmer or a lawyer or anybody who applies their mind to something, right? You could go off and build your own website, and it might take you 40 hours, and it might take one of us 10 hours, right?
Or less, right?
Or less, yeah, right. You get all that 35 or so hours back. So
yep. No, and adding those few lines of code, say that filter to category, yeah, but someone to do that would need to read my code, would need to figure out where in that code to put that feature, would need to learn PHP, would need to learn, like a bit of the WordPress circuit, right? Like there's so much that they would actually need to know to be able to put that in, and you're basically saving that for them. So it's huge.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your credit, probably you probably wrote the plugin in at least a halfway decent manner to make it easy for you to pop in such code. I mean, it's certainly not all like spaghetti code, because it would have taken you a lot longer.
Well, you can download the code off the WordPress repo and make that call for yourself.
Yeah,
just ignore the go-to statements. That's all. That's all I ask.
When I do the bumpers for this episode, I'm going to have looked at it and I'll comment later.
Yeah, exactly. So it turns out that Brian Hogg actually can't code at all, and you should just not listen to this at all.
Everything's just a giant print statement.
That is a big fear that a lot of people are getting started. I mean, obviously you should know as much as you can, and things like security as well. But I mean, again, especially when you're looking to do a business and sell plugins, the quicker you can get it out there and actually get some validation, get some real people testing it, the better. And your code might not be perfect, but when will it ever be perfect? And just getting that early feedback is way more important than sitting on it for months, if not years, thinking that your code or whatever that no one's going to really look at is up to par, whatever that par might be. So
absolutely. And to that point, I mean, the sooner you get it out there, if you spend so much time making sure it's perfect before you get it out, and then like nobody wants it, that's months
a bummer.
Down the drain. Yeah, Scott Bollinger gave that great piece of advice on a show in season 2 where he talked about like, hey, focus on something and then get it out there, because if you spend a year of your life working on something and nobody wants it, that's just like a year more or less down the drain as far as the product goes. Let's ignore the things that you've learned.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yep. No, at least it's a learning experience regardless. But I'm sure we could go on and on about people who sat on things for months and then only to find, either you've maybe added too much stuff too, right? That's the danger as well, is that literally you could just have feature bloat and you've just added all these things that you think need to be in there. And then you just made it so confusing that nobody knows how to do even the basic stuff, right? So, the easier you get it out there, it almost saves you from yourself adding all these things that you don't need.
Yeah, and if you do build, some of those things that go beyond the minimum viable product, take them out, and then you have them, ready to go. I used to do that for freelance jobs. It would take me just like a little bit of extra time, and I would leave it commented out, and then if they asked for it, I would uncomment it and.
Nice.
Here, I did this for you, like super fast. Like, here you go. Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because it's writing code for yourself or for a client is a learning experience, and it's fun, but it's also a business, and you need to kind of find the right balance, right? And I think you talk a little bit about that in your course, which we will touch on in a bit. But first, we've talked about doing things we both kind of mentioned the mastermind group, right? So you mentioned that you're in a couple. You also mentioned that you talk to your customers. What kind of advice do you glean from the groups that you're in and from the customers? Do you have specific mastermind groups for like business advice or features or maybe somebody to review your code, things like that?
Yeah, I mean they vary, and I literally just had a mastermind before this where they were even talking about, should we spin up another mastermind to talk about this specific thing? And I'm like, whoa. How many am I in now? 1, 2, 3, 4. So no, I mean you need to be careful about getting too much advice and then having analysis paralysis and then never actually doing anything. But one is with a couple other people who, again, have been doing the plugin stuff longer than I have, who can, give me feedback on either features I'm thinking of adding, or maybe the structure of the website and trying to optimize that for conversions, or just, whether they think, oh, this feature or pricing. I mean, that's a huge thing as well, right? Like I've had, especially with the course in one mastermind, I was thinking of pricing it a lot lower. And they're just like, no, you're saving people a ton of time, so they're giving that validation, that confidence to be like, yeah, you know what? And then if you price it higher, you can always have a discount. Whereas if you price it really low, you can't do any discounts because you're already so low to begin with, right? So they're all pretty different. Like one is, again, that plugin, WordPress plugin specific mastermind. One is for other people who are doing kind of general SaaS products and info products and just online. There's one that we're in, which is specific for course creators. So they all different people in each one. Oh, and another one that's again, info products and people, the one guy who started it and is kind of heading it up. Product 3300. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time and has, and sells nothing below, 200, 300, and it's just great for both ad spend, advice and landing page advice and stuff like that. So everyone has different tips and just different perspectives, but again, you need to be careful not to get, I do find it sometimes overwhelming where sometimes I just need to step back and go, you know what? There's no way to know for sure, what the right decision might be. So just make one and then learn from it. And then, in one person's right way, quote unquote, might not work for your audience and your product. So, ultimately you just need to kind of make a decision and go with it and not freeze too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you said, there's a lot of value to getting other perspectives, but it should be people that you trust, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just going to join like a general mastermind group where it's people I don't know, because then it's just people walking up to you being like, you know what you should do? Like, I'm a huge Disney fan.
Nice.
And every time I go to Disney World, I invariably overhear somebody say, you know what they should do? And then like just something that's specific to them. I'm like, they have 77,000 employees at Disney World alone.
Wow.
They've been doing this for 40 years. I'm sure they probably thought of that. Whatever you just said, they've thought of that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a very good advice. Yeah, I did actually join one and then subsequently left. It was like a paid Facebook group. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just, it was just a bunch of different people giving advice. And then you look and you're like, oh, like and it's not like it's a bad thing, but like one's a bookkeeper, one's like an artist, one's like a IT, whatever, like completely different domains, and they're giving advice on stuff that they have zero experience in. And it's fine to have like an opinion and give your thoughts. And sometimes it can totally cut through, your indecision or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it oftentimes is coming out of left field. And
yeah, absolutely. And that's not to poo-poo people giving advice. That's absolutely not the point of this. The point is that there are people who give advice just to give advice. And then there are people who give you advice that should legitimately help you. When I was in a business incubator right out of college, I won a business plan competition and we got office space and it was all very wonderful. And this is before I understood what the GPL was. So like our whole business model was flawed. Because our product was based on WordPress, to state that explicitly.
Yes.
And we had just a parade of local business owners coming into our office saying, you know what you need to do? And the subtext is, this worked for me, therefore it will work for you. And, I've said this on a previous show. One guy said, you know what you got to do? You got to wear a suit to work every day. No, I don't. I like wearing suits. I think I look good in suits.
Yep.
But I'm not going to wear a suit to work every day. I'm wearing shorts. I'm not wearing shoes right now. I'm very comfortable and I do good work. So
exactly.
That worked for you and that's great. You have a successful business, but understand my problem and who I am before giving me just like general advice.
Yeah. The best is almost questions, like people who have had the experience, realize that maybe what worked for me might not work for you, and just ask, oh, have you tried this? And then they'll give kind of feedback based on your answer, like, oh yeah, I tried this. It's like, oh, but did you really try that? Or did you just think you tried it, or you just discounted it because you didn't? Or, okay, cool. Yeah, you have tried this, maybe try this or something, right? Like the ones that speak less than you are usually the ones who are guiding you in the better direction, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, absolutely. The people who have the most valuable things to say are the people who don't speak a lot, right? Which I talk a lot, so take that with draw your own conclusions from that, I guess. Awesome. So, we've talked at length about kind of the general idea and the general business stuff, but let's get into the title question here. And so, how did you build your plugin? And this could be the mechanics of it, the tools that you used, how you sell the add-ons, and maybe something that's particularly interesting to me is you have the free version and you have the add-ons. How do you go about verifying and validating the add-ons and then continue to charge for those add-ons? So
I don't have add-ons for mine, but I do have the separate free and pro version. So I did start out as having like the add-on, like like free event calendar newsletter, which you had to have, and then having the pro, which was like an add-on to that, right?
Gotcha.
But ran into a whole slew, and I've got an article up on brianhogg.com just kind of going into a little more specifics. But essentially, I was getting people who were finding the plugin directly and were like, oh, I didn't even know there was a free version. I could have just maybe used the free version. I didn't really need this pro. Like, oops, because I wasn't really mentioning it too much on the website, right? But plus also keeping it up to date, which I noticed with a lot of different plugins, like Beaver Builder has kind of ironed this out, and same with Modern Tribe. But basically, you have to keep both in sync, and I found it a lot more useful to release just the pro version first, maybe to like if it's just a pro specific feature, but maybe touch on a bit of the free stuff. I could just now release it to the pro people without having to also update the free version at the exact same time. So I've got a process, which again, I detail a little more. It's a grunt script, I'm basically including the free version inside the pro version in like a core folder, and then, adding stuff on via hooks and filters and whatever else you need to do to add that additional functionality. So that's how I've structured it. It's worked really well to keep things, basically together. They're two separate repos, free and pro, but at least you've got kind of that sync between them, and you're free to release one or the other. And, users just have to install the one plugin. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. So you actually went the add-on route, noticed it didn't work that well for you, and then kind of re-architect. So we're actually getting into one of the later questions, which is what transformations has it gone through since launch?
Yes. And that would be one for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting. So you talked about your decision-making process there, and I will link to the blog post in the show notes. But did that cause... so maybe what was the biggest headache that caused for you? Was it support? Was it maintaining code base like you mentioned, or some combination of both?
Probably both, yeah. So before I did it, I didn't want to add to the support headache. So I made sure that the new pro version would detect that the free was there, not load the included free version inside the pro. It would detect that the free was already activated, and then just display a message. And I even made it really easy where the admin notice would you just click on it and it'll just automatically deactivate it. I suppose I could make it instantly deactivate, but I thought that was a good compromise to avoid
there's the balance of doing too much for the user and without informing the user, right? You want to let the user know you're about to disable this plugin. So.
Exactly, right? And then that way they can deactivate it and then delete it afterwards, because they're going to have to go in and hit delete anyway. So, so no, a lot of it was prompted by both support, again, having those people going, oh, I didn't realize there was a free version, having that extra install step that was really unnecessary. I mean, why can't I just include it into the pro? And then having, again, that flexibility to be able to release a free version first, or a pro version first with that new feature, whatever I needed to do, and have it, not be so tied together, and especially with some of the WordPress.org stuff that's been happening lately, where you release a new version of your plugin and it can show that there's an update, but then not update right away. It can take sometimes a few hours for one of the updates to show, depending on your caching settings and whatnot of your host. So it's nice to have it just when there's an update to that one plugin, there's an update to that one plugin, and away it goes. So you always have to, if your plugin assumes something, you've always got to have some fail safe in there to not totally bomb the site if the one isn't updated yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I wrote a podcast plugin that I use on How I Built It that relies on PowerPress. That's what I use for the site ultimately.
Yeah, nice.
Instead of building like a plugin, podcast plugin from scratch, like that's just a lot of work. And I was already on PowerPress, so but like if I were to release this to the wild, there is a failsafe to say like, hey, this relies on PowerPress. You should install PowerPress, otherwise everything will be broken.
Which I did actually on another plugin. I just totally assumed that with a plugin that's called the Events Calendar Shortcode plugin, right, that they would have the events calendar. Nope. And for a while on the new .org, and I think it still might be, sometimes when you search for things like event calendar, it comes up before the events calendar in the results, which is interesting. I'm happy about that, but I think the events calendar should be first. That just makes more sense. But yeah, so then I actually got a review that prompted that, and you should never trust, because this has been happening for months and months. So yeah, you gotta kind of do these, kind of not make these assumptions, because users often won't tell you. They'll just deactivate the plugin and go, that doesn't work, whatever. Yeah, literally got a review that said impossible. That was the whole review. Impossible to use or something, and then whatever. And I'm like, oh shoot, yeah, you didn't have the calendar installed. So now it has a message, it detects that, and instead of just not doing anything and not showing a message, it just says hey, and then you click on it, it shows the light box. You can very quickly install the events calendar, and away you go. So yep.
All right, and that is a wrap for part 1 of my interview with Brian Hogg. Really great conversation. We get pretty developer-y in the next episode, talking about build tools and releasing things to the plugin repository and things like that. So definitely tune in next week for that episode. In the meantime, why don't you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. I would really appreciate it. It helps people discover the show. And if you leave a nice review, I will read it on the air. If you leave a constructive review, that's great too, because I want to make the show better, especially because we're into the second year here. I'm experimenting a little bit more in future episodes, and so I want to make sure that things are what the listeners expect, and leaving a review on iTunes is certainly the best way to do that. Thanks so much to our sponsors, Liquid Web and Staging Pilot. Definitely check those guys out. And until next time, get out there and build something.